A legal win for thousands of immigrants. A judge in California blocks an order by President Trump that threatens deportations. And large protest in Washington as senators prepare for a final vote on Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh.
What you're experiencing in California is not a California problem. It's a national problem. People you meet out in the streets and sidewalks, I've spent a great deal of time on this issue.
A conversation with the candidate. Gavin Newsom talks with KPBS News about his campaign for governor.
And so that's what we try to do. We try to use theater for what it's supposed to do, and that is to raise the issues of our day.
A circus with a message, how the FERN Street Circus is using the issue of health care to connect with its audience. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. A federal judge from San Francisco has issued a temporary halt to a President Trump administration program that ended temporary protected status, or TPS, for nearly 300,000 immigrants. KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar has more.
The Trump administration announced they were ending the program for immigrants from Haiti, Sudan, Nicaragua, and El Salvador. The ACLU of Southern California filed a lawsuit saying the administration was changing the rules of the program out of racism. Now, U.S. District Judge Edward Chen has blocked Trump from ending the program. Chen said ending the protections could cause great suffering and harm to families. He also said there's evidence that President Trump has made negative comments about non-white immigrants without legal status. He cited Trump's comments about Mexicans, Muslims, and certain countries. Groups advocating for TPS immigrants' rights say they're happy about the ruling, but still concerned about the administration's policies.
The reality, from our standpoint, is that this administration wants to bring down the number of non-white foreigners who live in our country. It's very clear to us, that is part of their motivation, and TPS is probably the most emblematic program that is in antithesis to their goal of bringing down the number of non-white migrants in the United States.
A Department of Justice spokesperson says the ruling usurps the role of the executive branch and the administration did nothing wrong. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
The FBI has wrapped its investigation into sexual assault claims against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. The details will not be made public. Senators were briefed on the FBI's report. A final vote on Kavanaugh's nomination is expected this weekend.
But what I can say is that the most notable part of this report is what's not in it. As we noted by the White House, the FBI did not interview Brett Kavanaugh, nor did the FBI interview Dr. Blasey Ford.
Can we be scared by all these people rampaging through the halls, accosting members at airports, coming to their homes? They're trying to intimidate the Senate into defeating a good man. Are we going to allow this to happen?
A large crowd demonstrated outside the federal courthouse in Washington before marching to the Supreme Court. A handful of Republican senators, including Jeff Flake, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski, have yet to say how they will vote. Their choices will likely determine whether Kavanaugh is confirmed. An important procedural vote is expected tomorrow morning and may indicate how senators will ultimately vote on Kavanaugh. KPBS Radio will have live coverage at 7 a.m. October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says the county is starting a new campaign to encourage victims to come forward.
The district attorney's office says last year reports of domestic violence were up. To encourage people who may be in an abusive relationship to speak up, the DA is putting up billboards all over the county. Their theme is Now is the Time and provides contact information to the National Domestic Violence Hotline. These billboards are up in 60 locations throughout the county. DA Summer Steffen says they will stay there through next month. She says in the past, this type of advertising has helped domestic violence victims come forward to authorities. The campaign is being funded by a grant from the California Office of Emergency Services. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Former Vice President Joe Biden made a campaign stop in Fullerton this afternoon. Biden led a rally on behalf of Democrats, including Mike Levin, who is running in the 49th district. This while the race for the 50th district appears to be tightening. A new LA Times poll shows Congressman Duncan Hunter's leads Amar Campanajjar by just 2 points among likely voters. That's within the margin of error. Hunter's lead has narrowed since being indicted on charges related to the alleged misuse of campaign funds. The candidates for governor will square off Monday in a debate on KQED radio. Both Gavin Newsom and John Cox have pledged to resurrect the California dream if elected. KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma spoke to Newsom this week and asked him what that means to him.
I think the dream is about the ability to imagine one day replacing generationally the aspirations of your family and your parents. The fact is, from one generation to the next generation, there's a hope and expectation of social mobility. And the reality is the American dream, and increasingly the California dream, is a lie for too many people.
How do you respond to some critics who say you're too wealthy, you're too elite, to really understand the struggles that many people in this state are facing today?
The reality is I grew up with a mom, single mom, was a teenager, and she raised me with nothing. She came from nothing except hard work and grit. An example, I had severe learning disability, dyslexia, went to public schools, many different schools, worked jobs without exception throughout my life. So there's a mythology out there that somehow I was born at 22 years old when I opened my first business.
What will you do to build affordable homes?
Our goal is to get 3.5 million housing units over the next decade or so, plus or minus. In order to incentivize better behavior, I think we have to look at that tax allocation very differently. And that's a hurdle for mayors and for county administrators to reconcile, because we're used to that allocation of resources. But I think you need to change the incentive structure so cities can get back more aggressively in the housing business. Accordingly, the solution is more housing. It's not the state's job to build housing, state's job to create conditions where the private sector invests in new housing production. And that's why we laid out 15 specific strategies on land use fiscalization, upzoning around transit corridors, enhanced infrastructure financing districts, taking affordable housing tax credits from $85 to $500 million, focusing on the workforce housing.
Where do you stand on rent control?
I've supported rent. You couldn't be mayor of San Francisco if you didn't support rent control. You couldn't have survived one term.
So California has 134,000 homeless people, the highest of any state in the country. What would you push for that the state hasn't already tried?
One of the key goals that I have is to bring an agency director into the cabinet of the administration to elevate the status and elevate our efforts to address the blended need for interventions. Meaning right now, a lot of our interventions on homelessness are siloed. Every county probably has a dozen plus agencies that are somehow responsible to connect in one way, shape, or form to address the issue of an individual. We need to look at it from a whole person care perspective.
A thriving middle class is vital to any healthy economy. California's middle class is shrinking. What's your plan to rebuild? Well,
at the end of the day, it's an affordability crisis. So you got to deal with the issue of affordability, which is substantively a housing crisis. That issue is a housing issue, and more production, more preservation of existing housing stock, working against the pressures of gentrification and prevention efforts, I think will begin to address that issue. It can't be done overnight, but that substantively will address that squeeze on the middle class that millions and millions of Californians are feeling.
California has been hyper-successful at creating highly skilled, high-paying jobs, but many companies that paid middle incomes have left. How do you intend to bring companies that pay similar incomes into California and or create new industries that can support a middle-class lifestyle? Well,
look, I mean, we're still the largest manufacturing state in America, and that's important to remind people of. Most folks don't even believe that. So I have an economic and workforce development plan, and we've laid out as a paradigm of answering your question or framework to architect a response to your question, economic development plans in 14 regions in the state. We call it regions rising together. Each economic region is unique and distinctive from one another. And our goal is this, that the vision for economic growth cannot be realized from Sacramento, and that vision can't be sent down. It's a bottom-up vision that will be realized at the local level.
California is the richest state. It also has the highest poverty rate when you factor in the cost of living. 2 million children in the state are living in poverty. Some people say this is a problem that's entirely solvable. It's just a matter of political will. Do you agree?
100%. I mean, all of this is a matter of political will. We're as dumb as we want to be as a nation. We've allowed these conditions to persist. And child poverty is the ultimate manifestation of our failure. Well, homelessness and child poverty, I would argue, with twin manifestations that are the ultimate expression of our failure as Americans, not just Californians. And the way you address the issue of child poverty is you got to begin at the beginning. So we have to focus on prenatal care, early Head Start, nurse home visits, reading to our kids, talking to our kids, counting to our kids, playing with our kids, singing to our kids.
You've made the California dream your campaign theme. There's a lot of angst in this state, as you well know, over the cost of housing, over wages, over homelessness. How do you instill hope in a way that has substance?
I mean, because you look at the evidence. We have the lowest unemployment rate in history. We took a $27 billion budget deficit. We're debating the size of surpluses. We've had 100 consecutive months of net job growth. We lead in every factor of innovation. We have more scientists, more researchers, more engineers, more Nobel laureates, more patents emanating, more startups emanating out of California than any other place on the globe. We have the finest system of higher education anywhere in the world. California's best days will not be behind it. They'll absolutely be in front of it.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thanks for having me.
KPBS has also reached out to Republican gubernatorial candidate John Cox. 2 candidates are running to represent schools in San Diego Unified's coastal region. KPBS education reporter Megan Burks introduces us to both of them.
We got to work. It wasn't just the Civil Rights Act.
Retired school teacher and incumbent Michael McQuarrie can be found most days at district ribbon cuttings and assemblies. He says his goal for the coming years is to help San Diego students gain cultural competence to thrive in a global society, and he's the man to do it.
We set the direction, we hire the people to fulfill that, we hold them accountable, and we drive the program. And that's one reason why we've been able to achieve the outstanding results that we have now. We have the highest graduation rate of any urban school district in California. We have the lowest dropout rates. We are closing the achievement gap.
There are a lot of other issues that the trustees have to address.
McQuarrie's competitor, Marcia Nordstrom, is a parent and real estate professional.
I want to be able to bring my background and experience, which would bring more diversity in terms of balancing the board. They've got bond issues, there's real estate management. There's so much going on with this board in the district that I see myself as an asset.
Nordstrom says she'd comb through the district's 83 departments to assess their effectiveness, and she's promised to host town halls to improve communication. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
You can now prepare for the election with the KPBS Voters Guide. We have a link right on our homepage. It's a partnership with Voters Edge California. You'll find information on all the races and candidates right now at kpbs.org.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, the FBI investigation into Kavanaugh concludes. Now the Senate must decide if he sits on the Supreme Court. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Storm clouds have cleared out after a wet morning. This was some of the rain that fell in the College area. The weekend is expected to be a dry one. Justin Pavic has details in tonight's forecast.
Well, the onshore flow continues to rule our weather the next couple of days. That will bring some coastal clouds and some slightly cooler air to coastal communities. Some of the inland valleys looking at some slightly cooler than normal air. Could see some weekend changes, potentially even some wet snow over the very highest of terrain. That's going to be east. Satellite radar noticed the bulk of the showers for now north of the Bay Area. Closer inspection shows pretty quiet conditions here over southern portions of the state. Now, we are going to be talking about some clouds as we work our way toward the overnight hours, but nothing widespread working its way back in, as you can see, mostly on the clear side now. And we're going to be talking about again those clouds filtering back in toward the shoreline here later on tonight. As we drop down to 64 in Chula Vista, Borrego Springs will match that mark. Mount Laguna cooler at 48. So thickening clouds toward the shoreline. Some of those clouds will march inland toward the inland valleys here on Friday. As they begin to burn off, though, we'll look for some late day sunshine. Cooler flow of air coming into much of the Golden State, even into portions of Arizona. Temperatures abnormally chillier than they should be this time of the year. After a cloudy start, some sunshine returning to Oceanside and San Diego. Ramona back to 77. No major heat toward Borrego Springs as our high temperatures barely into the 90s. As we venture toward the weekend, we call it an inland slider, works its way to the south into the east, bringing wet weather to many of the valley locations and deeper canyons throughout Nevada, into Utah and northern Arizona. But the mountainous terrain, even into extreme southeastern California, we're going to be talking about perhaps some wet snowflakes up over 8,000 feet. Coastal communities just a tad cooler here over the weekend. Clouds in the morning, late day sunshine. Inland spots here just a bit cooler on Sunday as well. Pretty quiet early next week. Of course, we'll have to keep a close eye on Sergio to see where that moisture goes later on next week. Still a lot of time to watch. Mountainous terrain on Sunday, an afternoon shower. Very highest peaks could have a few wet snowflakes mixed in. And again, over the desert locations, we'll be talking about just a bit of a cool down here Sunday into Monday. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pavic. Back over to you, Ebony.
Wait times at DMV offices are improving. The director of the state DMV testified before lawmakers in Sacramento this afternoon. She says over the past couple of months, the average wait time has been reduced by nearly 1 hour. That's due to extra staffing, longer hours, and updated technology.
You have my commitment that the department will continue to look for opportunities to improve our operations. It is unacceptable for our customers to have to wait extended waits to get service.
The DMV director says her goal is to get wait times down to 15 minutes with an appointment and 45 minutes without. Governor Jerry Brown ordered an audit of the DMV after issues with excessive wait times and the mishandling of voter registration. $200 million will be spent to expand the use of electric cars in California, and all of that money is coming from Volkswagen. Capitol Public Radio's Randall White has details.
This most recent proposal is the second phase of a four-part settlement with Volkswagen over the automaker's emissions cheating scandal. The first phase rolled out last year, and phase two is set to kick in on July 1st of next year. It calls for expanding the network of charging stations, including some ultra-fast versions that can power a vehicle at the rate of 20 miles of range per minute. Today's cars can't handle that rate, but spokesman Brendan Jones says that will change quickly once phase two begins.
You have multiple vehicles coming onto the market. There's over 62 new EV vehicles expected to be launched in the United States by 2022, and that number expands even larger by the time you get to 2025.
Other aspects of the plan call for increasing the number of charging stations along key highway routes and creating autonomous vehicle charging stations. Phase one targeted the state's major cities. Phase two reaches into new areas, including Santa Rosa, Santa Cruz, and the Inland Empire. In Sacramento, I'm Randall White.
A couple from New York has turned their romance into a musical that's now showing at the La Jolla Playhouse. KPBS Arts Calendar editor Nina Guerin talked with the stars of 100 Days.
I'm at La Jolla Playhouse on the set of 100 Days, a musical memoir by husband and wife team Sean and Abigail Bankson.
Hello, I'm Sean Bankson, and I'm one of the creators of 100 Days. I also perform in it. Yeah, my wife and I wrote it with Sarah Ganscher, who wrote the book with us. 100 Days is the story of how my wife and I met and got married. We started a band together, and that first rehearsal ended up being our first date, and then 3 weeks later we were married. What the show is really about is saying that no, we don't have any guarantee about how long we have with anyone, but to try to not let that stop you from living.
I should be grateful it's more than... So what is it like to relive the early stages of your romance every night?
It's intense. It was a beautiful chapter, but it was also pretty dark.
And now you're at La Jolla Playhouse.
Yes.
Can you tell us why you wanted to bring it here?
Oh, well, we've been huge fans of the Playhouse from afar for years. And it's a total dream come true getting to come here. This is our big sort of rehearsal process for the whole tour. And so they helped us get everything together, and all this is gonna go in a truck and hit the road with us, just like a band.
For KPBS Arts, I'm Nina Guerin.
FERN Street Circus is coming up on 3 decades of performing and will launch a new neighborhood tour tomorrow. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando speaks with members to look back on its past and to talk about what fuels its social purpose.
Just because healthcare is a serious issue doesn't mean you can't laugh about it.
And we're going to address it in pre-existing condition of Funny Bone Saga. Our clown broke his funny bone.
Using circus to address social concerns is precisely what drove John Hyken to create FERN Street Circus in the first place.
It came out of my interest in Bertolt Brecht, who had a very political purpose in what he did and was always about entertainment. So to have a means of being in a neighborhood as compared to asking people to come to a central edifice was really important. So it was partly political. It's the notion that theater and art need to be where people live, where they work, where they play, where they learn. And this was a first major step for us in being able to do that.
That's a very different view of circus than what Hyken experienced as a child.
The first circus I saw was when I was 9 years old in Ringling in Portland, Oregon. I think my memory is that the elephants had polka dots painted on them or something, but it was not theatrically careful.
But Hyken's perspective on circus got a radical readjustment when he experienced a Cirque du Soleil show years later as an adult.
Oh my God, I'm seeing what circus can be, because they were so careful in how they approached every moment of that show.
That inspired him in 1990 to create his own show. And with funds from the city of San Diego and Commission for Arts and Culture, FERN Street Circus was born. The company's social mission appealed to Memo Mendez, who's been with the circus since 1996 and serves as its bilingual ringmaster.
And so we work in a working class community dealing with the problems that working class communities have. This time around, we're going to be dealing with the issue of health care. As we all know, very expensive, particularly for poor working people. So it's really nice to see artists involved in community issues, and also how to teach kids how to address these problems in a way that's very productive, it's very peaceful, it's very educational. And so that's what we try to do. We try to use theater for what it's supposed to do, and that is to raise the issues of our day.
1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6.
Valentina Martin's job is to help convey those issues through her choreography. She's used to creating big, sexy numbers with lots of showgirls. Now she has to fit her big ideas into a small space.
I'm thinking about big images. Of course, it's a big circus number, so what I want to do is meant to make a big, like, kapow, like a boom, like, wow, we're in a circus now.
But what you're not seeing at this rehearsal are the couple dozen kids she also has to fit into the single ring circus.
When we were doing it with the kids over the weekend, it's realized how much little space we actually have, and it's super crowded, having 30 kids on the stage plus 7 or 8 adults at the same time, and we're working in this ring curve that John has built and he's had for years and years, and we have only this much space, right? So it's confining.
But what can feel infinite are the possibilities presented by the talented people she works with, and she tries to incorporate the skills of each performer into the final production. The result is what makes circus a magical experience.
It's very interesting when we do circus shows all over San Diego. We go to tough neighborhoods, and sometimes some of the tough guys around there looking at us when we're setting up, like, what are you doing here? And as soon as the show starts, everything changes. No matter where you are in life, how old you are, when you see a show, when it starts happening, when you see the magic of it, you just leave reality for a minute and watch what's going on. Come down and see how our clown Otis fixes his funny bone.
And while you're laughing at his comic plight, you can also learn about how we all have a civic responsibility that we need to embrace. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
FERN Street Circus will perform Pre-Existing Condition, a Funny Bone Saga, this month for free at various parks locations. Now here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Turnout is expected to be high for next month's election, but how often do the candidates themselves get to the polls? We take a look at their voting records. And on Midday Edition, the state of the campaign in the 50th District, where polls show Congressman Duncan Hunter's lead is narrowing. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.